Greetings all, and welcome to the 26th episode of the V.T.P, or the Veteran Trainer's Perspective. Today, we are going to be taking a dive into the world of language in a way that is not always thought of, but is vital to the communication between Pokemon and humans that makes it possible for us to train with them as fighters and companions. Today, we are going to be taking a look into the world of Pokemon speech and communication, and how it functions, how we can potentially understand it, and how it ultimately makes the bonds of battle and love possible with them despite species boundaries.
The basics of speech in any form lie at the backbone of verbal communication and allow Pokemon people and other creatures on this planet to directly communicate with others without the need to see, smell, or feel them in any way, and has thus proven to be a valuable tool for establishing relationships of all sorts on land, in the water, and of course in the air, all coming in a myriad array of forms and executed in a number of different ways. There are noises we can hear where the human ear works best, but also with infrasound and ultrasonic levels, and each and every type of communication comes down to the auditory capabilities of each and every organism and what they feel is the best way to get a message across. It's also one of the easiest ways to transmit information, as sound works essentially the same in all parts of the world, a constant pressure wave emitted in the air whose properties mostly stay the same even if the environment might alter the way that it works in certain pressures and places. As a whole, sound has indeed proven to be a vital tool for communication across the animal kingdom and others. But in saying that, there is a common factor in that Pokemon can use it in a number of ways, some a bit more awkward than others.
I say this because, unlike humans in modern times, who have come to rely on language as the primary way in which we communicate with each other, Pokemon have adapted a number of different ways in which they communicate with each other in this fashion, and in turn, how they communicate with us.
On the one hand, there are many species that simply rely on grunts and other forms of communication that the human ear and mind do not really understand all that well on its own without other signs of communication, such as visual, to indicate what is being expressed or understood. This in turn makes the act of understanding them rather difficult, as it would be for many non-Pokemon wild animals, and leaves us with little more than context clues to try and decipher what they are saying to themselves and others without further cues to derive meaning from. Then there is the more typical cry that is given by Pokemon that, oddly enough, seems to match their name. Now, this is a bit of a contentious spot here to talk on, as there are a lot of arguments back and forth about whether the names of Pokemon came first or the cries they give off, and there are arguments to be made on both sides. For some, Pokemon names are assigned for specific reasons, and in turn seem to be imitating the names that are being given to them. This is especially the case with Mr. Mime, as the creatures are known to have not had a cry originally due to the way in which their vocal cords and brains are structured, but adapted the name after numerous people in the land of origin called them as such, which is also why they are a female Mr. Mime despite this species' name. However, these cases can be treated as exceptions to the rule, and for the sake of this conversation, I'll state that I fall into the latter category. As such, the names of many of these Pokemon are taken directly from their speech patterns and what the human ear discerns as actual words or names. That is certainly biased on our part to be sure, but at the same time it does raise the question of how communication really operates at this level, as while we hear different names and the like, it seems that Pokemon are able to understand what they say to each other in many cases, even if they might otherwise seem to be speaking different languages between species. As perplexing as it sounds, this is likely the result of bias on our end with the way the human brain and ears are built, as there are ultrasonic and even infrasonic attributes to these cries that are understandable between Pokemon with little issue, but otherwise are beyond what we can understand. As such, it seems that, for the most part, Pokemon can communicate freely with each other and understand each other in turn, an attribute that humans sadly cannot easily accomplish because of our reliance on multiple language fronts to communicate with each other among other roadblocks. However, this does not just stop at their types of speech, as it has been shown that Pokemon are capable of actually speaking in human languages to directly communicate with us, but in stark contrast to their own form of communication, this is a feat that only a select number of Pokemon are actually able to do. How exactly is that possible if they otherwise can communicate with each other freely in the majority of cases?
To answer this question, we need to examine the way in which the human body generates and understands different types of verbal communication, starting with a biological setup that allows us to produce sound in the first place.
This system is comprised of three main parts: the lungs, which are normally used for breathing, the articulators, which include the tongue, lips, gums, teeth, and the glottis, which is comprised of the vocal cords and the opening between them, and the larynx or voice box, which is the part of the body that actually makes our voice. The lungs are the easiest part to understand, as they, along with the muscles in the chest, allow for air to be pushed in and out of the body. This air then works to make the vocal folds in the larynx vibrate in order to produce sound, normally vibrating simultaneously, symmetrically, and continuously, with the structure of the voice box, the surrounding muscles, and the vibration rate inside deciding how the sound that issues forth from the body, well, sounds. The articulators in the body then act to modify the sound that is produced in this fashion, and turning allowing for the further manipulation of sound from inside the body to create more complex communication patterns and sounds, which helps form the biological backbone for the creation of language.
Next, let's take a look at the human ear to see how we perceive the sound that is actually made by others.
Sound waves from outside the body, or even inside, first enter the outer ear and travel through the ear canal, a narrow passageway that leads to the eardrum, which vibrates from the incoming sound waves and sends these vibrations to 3 tiny bones in the middle ear. The bones in the middle ear then amplify the sound vibrations and send them to the cochlea, a snail-shaped structure filled with fluid in the inner ear. An elastic partition called the basilar membrane runs from the beginning to the end of the cochlea and serves as the base upon which key hearing structures sit. Once the vibrations cause the fluid inside the cochlea to ripple, a traveling wave forms on hair cells sitting on top of the basilar membrane that mechanically trigger the release of chemicals into the cells, creating an electrical signal, which the auditory nerves then carry to the brain, which turns it into a sound that we recognize and understand.
With that out of the way, now that we understand how the body makes and hears sounds, let's take a look at the brain to see how sound is handled with relation to our topic of interest, specifically with a part of the brain known as Broca's area.
This part of the brain acts as a vital component to the creation of a complex speech network, as it is designed to interact with sensory information taken in from the temporal cortex of the brain on multiple fronts, including through the voice box and ears, process the information, and then devise a plan for speaking in response, passing that data to the motor cortex, which then controls the movement of the mouth and the rest of the first system examined to make sound in response. Now, it should be noted that the importance and influence of this part of the brain in language is still not entirely understood or certain, but it seems to be vital to responding to the verbal stimuli that come from other forms of life and the environment itself, and in turn has a large impact on the way that all of it is perceived and processed by the human brain. Typically, the creation of language and its communication are handled by the left side of the brain and thus sits as the seat of power in that area, though this can be different in certain circumstances, and there is no specific part of the brain that is actually responsible for language, instead being the creation of multiple parts of the brain working together in different ways to make its establishment possible. Regardless though, language is a part of communication that humans seemingly cannot live without now. But this is also an issue that should be mentioned alongside another factor for communication that is a bit more controversial to discuss, especially with the topic at hand being the way in which Pokémon communicate with each other, and that is intelligence.
This issue has a couple of components to it, namely how Pokémon receive and understand verbal information, how they respond to it, and whether or not they can actually comprehend it, so let's take it one piece at a time.
First of all, let's discuss how intelligence factors into a Pokémon's ability to actually understand human speech. And it's a bit of an awkward note. While for all intents and purposes, it might not make a lot of sense to expect for a wild animal of any sort to be able to understand human speech when they have not been trained to be capable of such a feat right out of the gate, it seems with Pokémon, it is actually quite the opposite. Whether they be bred in captivity or in the wild, encountered in human-populated locations or not, or have any connections to humans in their day-to-day lives, it seems that most Pokémon are able to understand human speech with almost no issue whatsoever, something that is highlighted greatly in Pokémon battles. Even if a Pokémon is freshly caught from the wild and then used in a battle, they demonstrate the capacity to understand human speech with little issue, so long as it involves a move or something of the sort they are actually able to execute. How this is possible is still a subject of great debate, as it seems to be an attribute that Pokémon share almost universally, even if they normally might not even process auditory information the same way that humans do, or if they would otherwise be deemed intelligent enough to even be capable of understanding human languages. While I cannot say myself for certain what is really going on, as was highlighted before, there is a good chance that it may not necessarily be the sound that humans can hear that is the cause, but instead the sound that we can't hear, like ultrasound and infrasound, which may be giving off signals that a Pokemon's brain can more readily process and react accordingly to. This can be tied back to certain Pokemon like Mew being said to be the ancestor of all Pokemon, as inaccurate as that statement might be, but as a whole it does at least hint towards it being more to the way our bodies produce sound in communicating with others than our brains are designed to readily process.
Next, there is the way that Pokemon respond to the auditory information they receive in this fashion.
Again, them being able to understand human language is something that is uncertain regarding its execution, but what is clear is that Pokemon will often respond with whatever vocal cries they are used to using in order to provide feedback, with only a few general exceptions, which will be covered in time. The issue that comes from this is that there is a language barrier between humans and Pokemon in this fashion, and while it might not exactly be a solid wall per se, as some people are able to derive meaning from what Pokemon say to them in certain ways, the wall still exists, blocking direct translation and comprehension in a lot of cases. As one might expect from wild Pokemon, these attempts at direct communication and the behavior that they are often derived from is likely a product of Pokemon seeing humans as another creature just like them, perhaps even assuming us to be Pokemon as well, and thus try to use their wider vocal range to communicate with us without knowing that we cannot totally understand what they are saying. The idea of Pokemon seeing humans as Pokemon is not entirely unfounded when it comes to language, as there are some creatures like Jinx that speak in a language that is not understood well by neither humans nor Pokemon, thus setting the precedent that such interactions are normal and not exceptional. I in no way advocate the idea of humans as Pokemon from a scientific aspect, but behaviorally, the miscommunication and misidentification is certainly there to take a hold of. This breakdown in communication capabilities in turn serves as a barrier to understanding the general intelligence of Pokemon to most, seeing as humans often use language as a way of discerning intelligence in day-to-day conversation, but for it to be more of a behavioral factor than an intellectual one makes sense for the general Pokemon population of the world, and in turn is worth separating from how humans might otherwise interpret intelligence.
The last factor to talk about when it comes to connecting human language with Pokemon language and their compatibility comes down to whether or not Pokemon can actually comprehend the specific language that humans communicate with. And in saying that, I'm referring to whether or not Pokemon can actually understand the specific meaning behind words and statements made by humans to them.
Here, I would like to make the distinction between knowing a language and understanding or learning what it actually means, as there is a huge disparity in terms of the number of species of Pokemon capable of committing to either of those camps. Take Chatot, for instance, a species known for being able to readily imitate the human tongue as a result of their anatomy and the systems discussed earlier. They, like many other parrots and other certain types of birds, do indeed have the capacity to imitate human speech and communicate with it. However, it cannot always be stated that they actually understand what they are saying. Sure, they might be able to use the language to communicate thoughts with context clues taken from initially hearing spoken words and how others react to them, thus incorporating it as part of their behavior, but there are serious discrepancies present in regards to whether or not it can be proven that they actually understand the meaning of the words they are speaking, and thus whether or not they speak of them as part of their behavior or as part of the brain's communication toolkit. Pokemon that can actually learn human languages are thus much more uncommon to find in the world, and it's not that surprising. Even as one species, the human race has created numerous languages throughout our time on Earth, and learning more than one can be a difficult task for just inside of our own species, let alone those used by completely different organisms. This, in my opinion, is where intelligence does play a notable factor, or at least one aspect of intelligence, as it is not the content of the words that is important, but the comprehension of them, and in a lot of cases, the higher order thinking skills needed for that sort of language processing simply don't exist in a lot of organisms.
With this said though, it is noted that there are indeed some species of Pokemon that can communicate in languages that are recognizable to humans with the limited anatomy that we are naturally equipped with, and this opens up many dialogue options that might otherwise not be apparent.
These creatures can be found far and wide across the globe, and while this is a wonderful feat to be sure, there is still the nagging question of how they can communicate verbally in this fashion. In some cases, it is a consequence of them having extended exposure to human language in combination with well-developed language processing abilities that gives rise to their capacity to communicate in audible speech. In other cases, it might just be an inherent ability that defines a Pokemon, the communicative tools at their disposal, and the way in which they live alongside humans, such as with Pokemon like Oranguru. Others still might pick up on the language and readily comprehend and communicate meaning through emotional connections, such as with Pokemon like Manaphy. These sorts of conditions, among others, along the same lines, serve to make Pokemon feel much closer to us and help to dissolve language barriers, and are to be honored for sure. But to wrap up this discussion, it should be stated that the language of humans can also still be spoken by them in some cases because of other activities worth noting here. Telepathy is a very common way of overriding the language barrier and is used by a lot of Psychic-type Pokemon, among others, to make it clear what their thoughts and intentions might be. While this is a wonderful communication tool for those lucky enough to encounter such creatures, not all Psychic types are capable of this feat, and others that can speak through telepathy are usually uncommon and not readily relied upon as a consequence. Ghost types sometimes have the capacity to possess others and in turn use a human or some other creature that can directly communicate in human languages to illustrate a point or communicate something specific to a wider audience, where they otherwise would be unable to communicate it adequately on their own, though the awkward feeling of such events is not always something that can easily be shaken off. Creatures like Ninetales and Zoroark can use their illusionary powers to conjure up illusions that also have the same capability to communicate with others in a way that they understand easily and directly, though whether this power is derived from psychic, spiritual, or some other form of energy tends to vary and is thus at the discretion of the actual capabilities of the Pokemon projecting said illusions. The Ultra Beast Kartana seem to have extremely well-developed mental capabilities that allow them to readily speak any language they are exposed to, but with the caveat that they speak it all backwards, an attribute that can still make it hard to speak directly with them if the messages cannot be reversed and rendered comprehensible. Even Pokemon that lack the forms needed for any sort of traditional auditory communication have their own ways of speaking to others, like Deoxys being able to communicate by generating auroras. So no matter which way you slice it, the ways that humans and Pokemon communicate with each other are many in number, and all serve to link us together under one shared planetary home. Pokemon and human communication has been the subject of much study, scrutiny, and analysis over the time we've been interacting with them, and with the many facets that define auditory information and how it is transferred and received, it is quite clear that communication, though not always easy, is a paramount and vital part of how we as a species interact with all others out in the world. We are growing as a species and being able to communicate with our fellow Earth inhabitants each and every day, and while there still may be a divide between us, in the end, we all strive for not just survival, but for a place in life that allows us to prosper alongside each other and not against.
Give your Pokemon some extra love tonight and let them know in any way that you can that, while you might not always understand each other, you are still there for each other until the very end. As we end today's discussion, and I hope to see you again soon, next time on the V.T.P. Thank you for watching this video. It brings me great joy to be able to speak to you all in the world each and every time we meet like this, to explore the many different facets of both the world of Pokemon as we know it, and the world as we live it, through every adventure we have with Pokemon by our side. If you'd like to, please subscribe, ring the bell, and all that jazz to keep yourself updated on content uploads and other materials of the like. You can also follow me on Twitter if you'd like to know right away when something new is uploaded, and my written works, from which most of this is based on, can be found on DeviantArt. Links to both can be found in the description down below. Remember that the world of Pokemon is a place full of wonder and mystery, and you never know what to expect. So, stay vigilant, keep watch, and always be prepared for the unexpected. Until next time, trainers and friends of all sorts, have a wonderful time.